Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Just gonna get all my windows set up here. All right. So hello, everybody. My name is Kyle Dzintars. I am a senior counselor at Counseling Services at SUNY Oswego. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the state of New York and a certified child center play therapist. On campus, I do clinical work and a little bit of outreach work. So doing programs like this to help bring some mental health education to the campus. So today you are here to learn a little bit about mental health, how to check in with yourself, some basic strategies, resources, and really anything that you can turn to that might be helpful, especially when there's times where you're overwhelmed or starting to feel the pressures of school or other responsibilities in your life. So we'll cover some of the basics today and kind of what contributes to our mental health and well-being as we go. So just some basics, what to expect. During this, I will present throughout the program. All participants are muted and you don't have to unmute yourself unless you wish to participate. If there's an opportunity to, feel free to use the chat for anything, whether that's asking questions or whether that's just participating in some of the prompts that we might have. If you do have a question, I'm happy to stick around at the end as well to talk through anything. And this is recorded and will be available on YouTube. So if you got to leave early or something like that, you'll be able to access it on our YouTube channel in the near future. So, as a disclaimer, this information isn't intended to be a replacement for clinical services. If you are in need of some extra support, I'll talk a little bit about our counseling services and some of the resources that you can access there. So feel free to check in, get some support when you need it. This is really an educational experience to learn a little bit more, basically how to self-assess and then how to make good decisions for yourself that are healthy and appropriate for what your needs are. Because we're talking about mental health, I think it's always good to just talk a little bit about what we experience when we're having these conversations. So if you notice for yourself that you're starting to feel overwhelmed, don't hesitate to turn your camera off or walk away from the computer for a little bit. Take a deep breath, just settle yourself. Do what you need to feel okay. None of the material is overtly triggering, but some things do bring up a lot for people. So if you start to feel that, do what you need to in that moment. And because there will be a recording in the future, you can always come back to the material you might miss. If this is an emergency situation that requires a higher level of care, do call 911 or go to the local emergency room if you are in need. Privacy and confidentiality can't be guaranteed. Obviously, this is a virtual space. You can see each other's names and who's participating in the workshop. So anything that you share, though, I do ask other audience members to just appreciate someone sharing some of their story and maybe some of what's going on for them in those moments, and try and keep those as private as possible. So what stays here or what goes on here, I think can stay here, and that can be okay. Please don't record the workshop. I will be recording it, as you can see, and it will be posted on YouTube. If any of this information might be useful for a club, organization, a department that you're working with, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share any of our materials and anything that might be useful for you in the future. And if you have any additional questions, you can always reach out to the Counseling Services Center in Oswego. Our number there is listed 315-312-4416. All right, so that's the basics. We have a little agenda here of what we're going to be doing, but I did want to start with a basic poll. I like to do these just to kind of sense like where everybody's at, how things are going for people. So feel free to fill this out. I'll have one at the end for you to fill out as well, just to let me know a little bit about feedback and how this went. Was it helpful? But to start, just how are you doing today? Have you ever attended an event with us before? Rate any of your knowledge of mental health, and then whether you follow our social media account. That would be super helpful, and I appreciate it. So while you're doing that, our basic agenda item, really just to cover mental health and mental illness, kind of differentiate them, get a little bit of information about both ends of the spectrum there. We'll address some levels of need. So if there's degrees of what we're feeling, how do we know what stage we're at? Are we in crisis? Are we experiencing mild stress? Are we somewhere in between? So I think it's helpful to go over kind of how to label those experiences and then what we can turn to when we're starting to feel a little bit more overwhelmed. We'll talk about those resources both on campus and then some strategies that you can put to practical use in your day-to-day. So that is the plan for tonight's workshop. This runs until 7, so we'll be here for an hour. But like I said, feel free to take a break when you need to, if you need to. All right, so basic counseling services information. This is the best way to reach out to us and contact us. If you are in need of some extra support, you have a goal that you're trying to work on that a counselor could be helpful for, and really how to get a hold of us. So we're located in the Mary Walker building, which is in the same building as health services on campus. We are in the back end of the building, so you can head through the main entrance and you'll walk straight to the back to find us. You can call to set up an appointment, or you can stop in if you want to speak with our office manager, Patty. She'll get you set up with an appointment. She's wonderfully friendly. She'll help you feel very welcome there and get you set up with what you need in the moment. You can find more information about our services on our website, which is listed there. I won't go into too much detail about the specifics, but we do offer a wide range of services. So if any of it does look interesting and you're just trying to figure out more about it, I'd say go to our website to get more information. And then you can follow us on social media. We have our counseling services Instagram, which is mindful_Oz, and our COPE team, which is our counseling outreach peer educator team. They are a bunch of undergraduate students who are just passionate about mental health. They help us run some of the outreach around campus, and you should be on the lookout for their upcoming events. They'll be running some stuff for Random Acts of Kindness Week next week. So feel free to stop by any of the tables that'll be going on Monday and Thursday. All right. So I'll put this back up at the end of the presentation. So if you don't catch it, feel free to either stick around and take a screenshot or whatever works for you. All right. So let's just start, because taking care of our mental health is an active practice. It's something that we have to be attentive to and really focused on. So wherever you are doing whatever you're doing, all I'll ask you to do is just get comfortable in your seat, laying down. Just notice how you're positioned. Are you holding any tension anywhere? Are you feeling like uncomfortable? Get into a comfortable position. So maybe that means putting your feet on the floor. Maybe that means putting your hands at your side or in your lap. Maybe that means picking your shoulders up and rolling them back. We carry a lot of tension in our neck and shoulder area. Just kind of wiggle things out. Let your body feel loosened up. And then when you settle, we're just going to start with a nice deep breath in. You can close your eyes if you choose to, or you can keep them open. And then a slow exhale out. You're going to feel your lungs fill up. And then exhale slowly out. And we'll take one more together. Nice deep breath in, a little bit deeper than the first time. And a slow breath out. And just notice how you feel. Just check in with yourself. Notice as you are listening if you're holding any tension. Get comfortable whenever you need to, but pay attention to your body. So hopefully that was a grounding. We're here, we're now. We can be attentive. So those little adjustments we'll do throughout here and there, but pay attention to how you're feeling, any tension that you're holding, any stress that you start to feel, and be conscious of that. Okay. So let's start with, what is mental illness? The CDC defines this here as mental illnesses are conditions that affect a person's thinking, feeling, mood, behavior, such as depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. Those conditions can be occasional or long-lasting, sometimes chronic, and affect someone's ability to relate to others and function each day. So for a lot of these kind of conditions, they meet diagnostic criteria. So going to a licensed professional, someone who's trained in mental health diagnosis specifically, they can help you provide a diagnosis if you are seeking to learn a little bit more about what you're experiencing, or to check in with somebody to see if something does meet criteria for a diagnosis. Not everything does, right? Like some degree of anxiety is normal. It's just part of being alive, being a human being, dealing with the world around us. Sometimes it does meet these criteria, and it can be really helpful to sit down with a professional to sort through what's going on for you and really the severity or how much you're experiencing, what could be useful. Some experiences with mental illness affect our mood and thinking and behaviors. Some are more short term. So I think of something like an adjustment disorder. It might be something that's associated with a short term event, like moving to college, for example. You might experience an adjustment period that meets the criteria for the adjustment disorder, but maybe goes away as you get familiar and acquainted with the environment. Some are more long term. They require different treatments, working with other professionals, and sometimes medication can be really helpful if this is a consistent chronic experience. And severity varies. We have a lot of different ranges of what mental illnesses exist and how they affect people. But some of the causes and I think influences in our experience of mental illness come from our traumatic events, sometimes have genetic links, sometimes are contributed to by environmental factors, physical health, medical conditions, substance use, nutrition, adjustment, transition, societal factors. There's just a lot of things that can influence how we are feeling and the way that our body operates. So just being attentive to some of those factors can really help us to sort through what's going on for us at any given time. And we'll talk more about context specifically as we continue through this. So I wanted to provide a little bit of information on where we're at. So we're starting to see the initial data from the pandemic and how that has affected our mental health, mental illness rates, and really the ability for people to seek support. So you'll see I provided a document here from the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It was initially published in 2020, and then they've updated it for 2021 based on the 2020 stats. I wanted to highlight at least some of these experiences and why this might be relevant, especially for a college population. But 1 in 5 adults are experiencing a mental illness at the time of the pandemic. And that's not too much different than it was pre-pandemic. It tends to be a trend that occurs within our society. 1 in 20 experienced a serious mental illness during the pandemic, and 12 plus million had serious thoughts of suicide. So that can be a really staggering statistic to know how many people were struggling, especially with the context of the pandemic, all of the stuff that we were dealing with beyond just the virus itself. So I think there's a lot of impact on isolation, on our kind of dealing with the health and safety concerns that we've had since the pandemic started. Beyond that, 1 in 6 US youth between the age of 6 and 17 experience a mental health disorder each year. So that's been a common trend. And I think something to call attention to. Sometimes mental illness can start earlier on in our lives, and we might not have language or an understanding of what's going on for us. So for a lot of people, sometimes when they get to college, they have a little bit of independence. They can start to look into it a little bit more, whether that's learning a little bit for yourself about mental health and mental illness, whether that's checking in with a provider. For some people who come to college, this is their first time where they don't have to have parents' permission to do so. They can use services and be able to check in with somebody to sort through like what's going on, get some clarification. And another part of this is 50% of lifetime mental illness begins by age 14, and 75% of lifetime mental illness begins at age 24. So a lot of mental illness starts to present during this age range. And that isn't to scare you or alarm you, but it's something to be conscious of, especially with friends that you might meet on campus, other people that you kind of find yourself in classes with or in your social circles, and even for yourself, just to check in with, okay, what am I experiencing? How long has this been going on? And when do I really need to maybe seek some support to get an idea of what's affecting me? So this occurs differently for different people, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to self-assess, what could be really helpful for you as you're trying to piece things together. So that brings me to some recent data that just got published within the last few weeks These are some of the top concerns that are affecting college students currently. So a mass study is done over 180 universities across the US and 153,000 unique students who have contributed to this information. So the top concerns that people seek counseling on college campuses for are anxiety, stress, depression, family, and academic performance. So if you are someone who's been struggling throughout the pandemic, maybe just being at college, maybe this semester, and these things kind of resonate with you, you're in company with other people. There's a lot of effect of what we are experiencing with the pandemic, but also that just comes with being a college student. That means having a high number of classes, maybe a lot of work to do for those classes, dealing with social situations, maybe carrying a job or an independent study or an internship. There's a lot of things that college students juggle. So some of this stuff makes sense in our context, but these are pretty high rates for that to be the case. So we do have to look at our context and maybe what's playing a factor in these concerns. But I think if you have been on the fence and you're not really sure, you're experiencing some of these symptoms, presenting symptoms, maybe this is a good time to check in and sort through that. Get some support so that you don't have to carry it forward on your own, because a lot of people do carry this by themselves. So I think that's a good overview of kind of what college students are seeking counseling services at counseling centers for. But the information is all available. If you go to the CCMH website, you can actually look at their overview. Their annual report was published, I think, about 2 weeks ago. So a lot of good information in there if you're curious. Okay, so on the flip side of this, what is mental health? So because we said some things are just naturally occurring because we are human, sometimes we look to diagnosis as a way to identify what we're experiencing. But mental health plays a factor in this because sometimes we can have poor mental health without having a mental illness. So I think of times where we just are experiencing a large amount of stress, feeling really overwhelmed, just kind of dealing with a lot of obstacles or challenges. And that does affect how we feel. Stress levels cause our body to operate differently, changes the way our thinking is, and kind of affects the way that we feel confident, maybe our energy levels, our ability to sleep and eat. So mental health is looking at some of these emotional, psychological, and social well-being portions of our lives. This can also affect how we think, feel, and act. And it helps us to determine basically how we manage stress. How do we relate to other people? How do we make choices that are healthy and appropriate for what we're experiencing? And mental health is important at all stages of life. This is something that we have to be somewhat attentive to throughout various developmental levels. But these are the things that we have a little bit of say in. So what can we do to provide ourselves positive mental health experiences, to be supportive to our own mental health? Because I think the longer we go without attending to our mental health, maintaining our mental health, the more we risk running into mental illness, something that becomes more chronic. So mental health allows us to be a little bit more proactive. So what does this consist of specifically? A lot of different things. So maybe it's meaning and purpose. You're in college, maybe you figured out what your major is, what your hope, your future career might be. Maybe you're still sorting through it. You can see where that would be confusing. If you don't have a direction for yourself, sometimes that causes a lot more stress and anxiety. We like to feel settled, know what our next step might be. Support and connection. This is a place where you meet a lot of people. Building good connections, healthy connections, finding the people who understand you, who you can be yourself with becomes really important. Finding connections with mentors, professors that you appreciate, and building, I think, a sense of safety within our community becomes really vital as well for taking care of our mental health. Safety and security plays a big part in this. Can we feel safe and grounded on our campus, in our dorm, with our friend group, in our relationship? A relationship with our environment. So are we connected to the world around us? Are we living in a bubble? Our personal growth. Do we feel like we're growing? Do we feel like we're stagnant or reverting? Our physical health. So are we maintaining? Are we getting enough sleep? I know college students aren't getting enough sleep. I hear about it all the time. I think it's really important that we check in with, are we taking care of our physical body? Are we giving it rest because it needs rest? Our brain needs rest. Our muscles need rest. We need rest. Are we putting good stuff into our body in terms of nutrition? Are we making healthy choices that can help us to think clearly and feel better? And then are we allowing ourselves to get rest? I know for a lot of college students, if you're experiencing this, you're not alone. They feel real guilty about days where they don't have to do anything, where they can just sit and read or play a game or just sit and do nothing. It brings up a lot of guilt and shame and worry and the need to be productive, which sometimes is really detrimental to us. How do we cope with challenges? We're gonna face challenges. That's a part of being in the world. How do we deal with those? We have a lot of different reactions, responses to it, but we'll talk through some ideas for you as we continue on. Can we accept our emotional experience? Are we gonna be okay with the fact that we're angry about something, that we're sad about something? Do we maybe not have good models for what feeling those things is like? So sometimes we have to look at, what are we allowing ourselves to feel? What are we not allowing ourselves to feel? And why? And then finally, agency and choice. We all need that in our lives. We need the ability to feel like we have some say in what's going on for us in our environments, in our spaces, in our immediate lives, in our relationships. So can we find opportunity to make choices for ourselves and feel like we're making a life that we want to live? So all of these things are good places to consider. Are you taking care of your mental health? Are you feeling mentally healthy? Some of these might be doing better than others. And that's okay. I think we start to feel the shift when too many of them feel out of our control, out of our ability to cope with all of this. So we'll talk some strategies as we continue on here. I like this diagram as a way to kind of put it into context. I know I mentioned before, you can have poor mental health without having a mental illness. And the flip can be said as well. Like, you can be diagnosed with a mental illness and have positive mental health. So there's a lot of people that have a diagnosis. They've met the criteria. They've gotten a diagnosis from a licensed provider, but they're doing okay. They found the coping strategies that worked. They have the support and resources that help them to be successful in their lives. So understanding that it isn't an all or nothing. It's not you're doing great or you're not doing great at all. There's a lot of in between. So I think this helps to put that into like a visual that we can look at. There are going to be times where our mental health drops and we're struggling, but it might not be diagnostically a mental illness. It might be a good time to check in with someone who can offer support or connect with other people who are important to you, try out some of those self-care practices. But just because you saw it on TikTok doesn't mean that you're diagnosed with it. And I think that's a really important thing to address here. We are learning a lot more as a culture about mental health, but there are reasons why there are at least some systems in place to help us sort through it. So if you are starting to worry, you've seen enough TikToks that point towards ADHD or autism, maybe check in with a provider, bring that to their attention. It's a good place to kind of sort through it and get some clarification on it. There's a lot of mental health providers who want to be of assistance in that realm. So if you're starting to suspect something, you've read a lot, you're starting to put some pieces together, check in with somebody. Don't feel like you got to do that all on your own. Okay, so in terms of treatment, a lot more people are seeking treatment at this point, which makes a lot of sense, right? Like, we're dealing with the pandemic. It has not been easy. There's been a lot more isolation, people struggling with things that they used to not struggle with, just because the world is harder than it was before. So more people are seeking treatment, which is good. It helps us to feel like we can reach out, we can ask for help when we need it. But it's also somewhat confusing sometimes, right? Like, I feel this way, but who do I go to? I'm really upset about my grades right now, but I'm not going to call a suicide prevention hotline. That doesn't feel like the right fit. Who can I reach out to talk about all the stress that I'm feeling? So part of this, and as we move forward, we'll talk more about those layers, like what level of need are you at and what resources might be available. But know that there are different types of support. There's short-term counseling, which we do on campus. We meet typically bi-weekly with students. We work towards a goal that is set by the student. So maybe it's to work on social anxiety. You're just looking to make some new friends. You don't really feel comfortable. Sometimes it's awkward to talk to people. We can help you work through that. So some of those short-term, I think, are really attainable. You set the goal, we create a plan and some steps that can be useful, and you get to have some support, talk it through with somebody as you're working on the goal. Long-term care is something that we typically refer to the community for. Those can be providers that provide weekly appointments. They might be able to connect you with other various providers, which we can also do at the counseling center. But some people do require that consistency. They need kind of a long-term provider that they can work with, even over breaks. Some require medication intervention. So maybe that's getting connected with a psychologist or psychiatrist. We can help get you connected if that is something that you're interested in and want clarification on. And some, they prefer groups. It's scary sometimes. Groups feel like intimidating. You're around a lot of people and not really sure who's going to show up to it. But sometimes it's just really nice to know that you're not alone in things. Some of our drop-in groups have been really helpful for people, especially because they find connection and feel like other people get it when maybe most of the people in your life don't get it. So groups can be really helpful. We have a bunch that we're offering on campus, and you can feel free to check out our website to get the details about those. Some specific therapy approaches are good for specific treatments, whether that's mental illness or a specific issue that someone might be dealing with. So there are people who are specialized in different approaches. They can help with specific scenarios and needs. They can help you meet different goals. So I think looking around and doing a little bit of research to see which providers are out there, what types of approaches might be useful, can be really helpful. It's very different to work with a general clinician who specializes in short-term counseling versus someone who has training in eating disorders, for example. That's going to be a very different experience. So while short-term counseling might be helpful to start the conversation, get you connected to a provider, maybe the specialized care can be really helpful to speak with someone who has that training and who can be of support in that way. Some require just education, right? Like maybe some of you here are here because you want to do the work and you're just looking at a starting point. You want to learn a little bit more and put it into practice and see how you feel. I think that's a good way to kind of go about some of this, especially if you're feeling like it's not super overwhelming. I feel like I have a handle on a lot of things, but anxiety's been creeping up on me. Getting some of the education can be really helpful. And then someone who listens can also just be really powerful. Sometimes we just need to feel heard, to know that someone else hears us and sees us. So how do we know what we need? And we're going to jump into that in a second, but another pause. Get comfortable. Notice what you're carrying in your body right now. We just talked about a little bit of heavy stuff. Do you notice you're holding tension? Are you uncomfortable? Do you need to shift, move your body around a little bit? And then everybody take a nice deep breath in. And the lungs fill up. And a slow exhale out. And just look around your space. Just pay attention to what's in your environment right now. Maybe just notice 5 things that you see. And so doing that just calls attention to the fact that we're here, we're learning, we're looking at a screen for a while. Maybe you're just listening, but those little breaks become really powerful for us. Just to snap out of it, check into our body, get out of our brains for a little bit. So we'll continue to do that as we go. But like I said, if anybody has questions, feel free to put those in the chat. We can address anything that you might be curious about. And we can also wait until the end if anybody wants to stick around. But I'm curious, when it comes to self-care, what works for you? When you're starting to feel overwhelmed, you're having a stressful day, what do you turn to that helps you to feel a little bit different? Maybe a little bit better, maybe it helps you calm down. You can put those in the chat. That would be great. I'd love to see what everybody turns to already. We've got watching a good series. Yep. So something that you can like focus on, distract yourself with. Got some music, cleaning, always good. Just get some stuff organized. Candle and reading a book, shower, drawing, napping. Yep. Movie. Awesome. Yeah, a lot of this stuff can be super helpful for just like changing up. We don't have to sit with our thoughts too long. We don't have to hold so much tension and stress. We can turn to things that make us feel a little bit better and ease the pressure. The more pressure we hold on to, the harder things get. So feel free to keep adding them in there as you see fit. I'll check back in a little bit, but thank you for sharing. I really appreciate hearing kind of what everybody turns to and what they use. Okay. So how do we know what we need when we're feeling a certain way? I'll use like I guess a similar example, a little bit different. You stub your toe. Do you need to go to the doctor for it? Is like medical care required? You're stressed about an exam. Does that mean you have to go to counseling for it? I think in both cases, it really depends on the severity. How much pain, how much stress, how much overwhelm are you going through when you assess that situation, right? So you stub your toe, pain goes away after a little bit. It doesn't feel great. It's uncomfortable. If pain doesn't go away, your toe is throbbing, swells up. Maybe a higher level of care is needed for that. The same can be said about the other example when it comes to stress. Do you get so stressed out that you can't go to an exam? Do you get so stressed out about the exam that you get to the exam and you blank out and you can't even complete it? Does that happen more than once in more than one class? So that's going to change kind of the need level. If it's one test in one class and it doesn't happen again, then okay, that was one moment where things were maybe context-wise just overwhelming. But if it becomes more habitual, chronic, bigger, maybe that's a good time to check in with a support. So we're going to talk through different levels of need, but I want you to consider this stuff as we're going through this, because these are all things that affect our levels of need. So for example, a test might be stressful, but a test is going to be way more stressful if you have not gotten enough sleep, if you haven't been eating or eating well, if you aren't able to feel like your physical health is in a good place, if you're dealing with racism or sexism, that's going to impact your ability to manage some of these stressors. So as we look at these to consider, I want you to imagine and maybe think about those factors in your own life. If you're experiencing anxiety, maybe some depression, are some of these also being affected and maybe causing some of what you're experiencing? So family history is always really important to check in with. Getting a sense of, is there a past history of mental illness in your family? Is there a cultural dynamic where maybe it's not okay to talk about mental health in your family? Or maybe family doesn't get it. They think you just got to push through and tough it out. Have there been traumatic events that you've experienced or that you've witnessed? Sometimes those play a factor in how our body operates, how our mind operates. Context and environment, super important in this. If you're experiencing any of the isms, sexism, racism, homophobia, if you're dealing with ableism, you're not feeling heard, valued, seen, or you're feeling threatened, it doesn't make your experiences easy. If anything, it leads to carrying a lot more stress and anxiety, and that can feed into mental illness, especially when it comes to depression and feeling like these are chronic experiences. Do you feel safe? Family dynamics. So do you feel like your family understands where you're at? Do they not understand your experiences? Do you have friends that you can turn to who do get it or not? What's your workplace like? Do you feel valued? Do you feel like you're working so many hours, not making enough money, you're not feeling understood, and that you need a day off? And are there bigger issues going on in your state, country, in the world that might be affecting your mental well-being? A lot of that stuff has been very real over the last few years. We've been going through social uprisings. We've been going through political upheaval. We've been going through everything, a pandemic related. There's a lot. So this stuff plays a factor. Again, sleep, nutrition, physical health. Do you feel like your body is taken care of? Are there physical health needs, medical conditions that need to be attended to? Is checking in with a primary care doctor important? Connection and isolation. Do you feel alone? Do you feel like you have good connections? Do you feel like the connections you have aren't ideal? Like you struggle with feeling like your friends are there for you or that they're supportive? Do you worry that people in your life are toxic or that you are being toxic in those relationships? The amount of quality downtime. So rest. Are you able to do that? And then assessing your own expectations. Do you expect so much of yourself that you can't slow down, that you can't say no to things, that you can't just hand in the assignment and be okay with it? And then the expectations of others. A lot of people deal with family expectations. They have to succeed in a specific way, whether that's meeting a GPA or moving into a career that they might not actually be interested in. So what kind of expectations do you feel in your life, your own and other people? So consider these as you are looking at your level of need. If not many of these are really too overwhelming for you, okay, that's understandable. It helps you to put that into context. If any of these are causing a lot for you, stress related, anxiety related, depression related, it's important to assess the need level with these factors in mind. And on the flip side of that, some resources to consider. So we're going to talk about some of the resources that you have access to as a student here, but there's so many resources out there. As you're doing your own research and kind of finding what the right fit is, keep these in mind. So connection, what's going to help you connect to other people? That could be providers, that could be friends, that could be people who are going through similar situations, it could be mentors, it could be people that can be guides for you. Basic needs. Do you have access to the food that you need? Is your shelter consistent? Do you have a safe place to call home? Are you feeling safe? Financial support. So do you have enough money to take care of all of your needs on campus? So maybe you don't have enough to get your textbooks and that's making classes really difficult. What can you do? Where can you turn to maybe get some financial help with that so that you're not falling behind and struggling? Emotional co-regulation or just regulation for yourself. So do you have supports? What supports would be out there? Is there a club or an organization that might be really helpful for you to join so that you don't feel so alone? Do you have outlets for yourself to calm yourself down? Some of you do. You mentioned drawing and writing and kind of turning to those expressive arts. What are your outlets? How do you talk about what's going on with you or express what you need to? And then do you have access to calming practices? So all of a sudden your anxiety and stress levels skyrocket. How do you ground yourself? For some, it's connecting with someone that they trust and love and care about that helps them to feel safe. For others, it's grounding your body. Can you allow yourself some space to breathe, to relax, to sit, to separate yourself from stressors? Emotional care, which we'll talk more about when it comes to writing and creating, organizing your own thoughts, nurturing practices, self-compassion practices, and meditation can all be really helpful. And physical care, checking in with providers, doing some exercise, whatever that means for your own ability levels. Nurturing practices, so taking care of your body, eating, sleeping, and organizing your space. So when you start to look for resources that might not be listed here, keep these in mind. Do I have a need in one of these realms? And what exists out there for me? Because there are a lot of spaces that we can look for support when we're struggling. Okay, so we're going to break this down into some categories here. There's a lot of different ways that people have done this. I would highly recommend looking at the Mental Health Coalition's version of this. I can put the link in the chat toward the end of this, but they have a really good breakdown that I feel like I've modeled this off of. So a lot of our levels of need depend on our experiences. If you're experiencing maybe what you would consider mild or manageable, especially, some of this stuff might be a factor in that. So maybe you're having difficulty getting some of your work done. You're not like failing your classes, but like it doesn't feel great to work on a project right now. Test anxiety, it's stressful to go to a test, but you can do it. It doesn't feel great. Procrastination, which I think is a very common experience right now, like procrastination, motivation, that stuff has been a struggle during the pandemic for a lot of people. Friendships, relationship struggles, those are pretty common. They can cause stress and overwhelm, but maybe it's not terrible. You're not going through any major issues. Some things just feel uncomfortable. Loneliness, moving to college has been a little bit different. You haven't really found your people yet. You feel like you're being successful, you're handling everything, you just want to make some friends. And maybe feeling the start of being overwhelmed by things. So this isn't concrete. Some of this stuff is going to feel different depending on the person. I think this is just a good way to kind of structure and get a sense of maybe what works for you. I highly recommend creating your own structure that meets your specific needs. How do you know when you're experiencing mild level of need? Or it would be good to reach out to a friend, or it'd be good to study a little bit more. How do you know what you're going through? So some resources that you can try out if you are at this stage. Talking to friends, family, I think is always a good outlet to start with. Who can you talk to that's going to be a good listener to you? Who's going to get it? Who's going to be supportive? We have a lot of different offices on campus that can be helpful. One of them is the Office of Learning Services. So this might be good for tutoring or just getting connected with some study strategies. They run some workshops once in a while that can help with academics. Laker Life, if you're new to campus or just struggling to find some people that you connect with, there's a lot of clubs and orgs that have specific interests. It can be anywhere from gaming to identity to, I mean, you name it, sports, e-games, whatever. Look for those kind of groups that might exist already so you can encounter new people. Let's Talk is one of our services that the Counseling Center offers. So this is a drop-in service. You don't have to have an appointment. We run these in the library and in Lakeside. So if you want to drop in, you can talk with one of our counselors who is available there. It's a good place to just run something by somebody. Like, I don't have anybody I can talk to about this. I just want to talk it through. Sometimes that's really helpful just to have a third party who's outside of the situation. So if that seems like a doable experience, you can use Let's Talk as much as you want. They're offered, I think, 4 times a week at this point, and no appointment needed. You can use it as much or as little as you want. For some people, 1 or 2 times is perfectly fine. They talk through what's going on. That helps them. Our counseling outreach peer educators, they offer a drop-in space called Tea Talk. This will actually be starting up on Monday at 3 o'clock. It should be in the Murano Campus Center, so you can look for our tabling event that we'll be running. If you are just looking to talk with other students who have learned a little bit about mental health and want to offer some support to other people who might be struggling, that's a good space to go to. They're all undergraduate students. Some of them are here today, and they know what is going on, what it's like to be a student, what you might be struggling with. So if you're looking to just make a connection, maybe get to talk through some strategies, that's a good stop. They'll run some programming you can always drop by. The health peer eds also offer a bunch of educational workshops, tabling. They're another great resource to talk through any strategies. A lot of their education comes through some of the posts that they do, some of their tabling events and workshops, but they can cover things like sleep workshops, and they'll talk through some of the nutrition and just being a little bit more familiar with some of the resources that the campus offers there. Writing, creativity, yoga, meditation, some of the basics that we hear a lot about for just making sure that we feel okay. The 7 Cups of Tea app is a wonderful free app. Some of it you have to pay for. You don't need to pay for it though. There's a lot of good stuff that's on there, like prompts, like active listeners who are trained to communicate through text. So if you just want to talk to somebody outside of a situation, they can be really good for listening. Tutoring center, if you're struggling with academics, you just need to check in with somebody. And the writing center also. So you can kind of see this addresses some of those, yeah, these are causing me stress moments, but they're not overwhelming me. I'm not feeling defeated by them. I just need like a little bit of support. If we tackle these as they're happening, it prevents some of the buildup that ends up leading to feeling more moderately or more severely overwhelmed. So if you can get ahead of this stuff earlier, you're going to alleviate some of the pressure, and that's going to help you feel better overall so that it doesn't continue to build. So moderate experiences, or maybe a little bit of a higher level of care is needed. You're struggling to go to class, overwhelming anxiety. It is hard sometimes to leave your room, to go to class, to talk to people. Noticeable increase or decrease in sleeping or eating. So sleeping way too much, not sleeping at all, eating way more than you're used to, or not eating at all. Any of those changes can be an indicator that things aren't going so well right now. You're isolating yourself more than usual, so it's hard to feel like you can reach out to people. You're choosing not to. Emotional overwhelm, so an experiencing of crying more often than usual, just feeling really angry, sad, worry. Some of these things can be exacerbated by those context conditions that we talked about before. So was there a major event that happened in the world that was really disruptive? Something that was in the news that really made you feel angry, upset? Large changes in mood. So you're used to feeling like pretty okay, and you have not been feeling okay. There's been a bigger change to what you've been feeling. You're neglecting your own self-care, your hygiene. Maybe you're not taking care of yourself in the ways that you're used to. You're noticing that it's harder to get up and take a shower, or you can't turn to some of the coping strategies you've used before. It just doesn't feel like you have the energy or motivation to. And maybe some increase in alcohol or drug use. So people turn to substances sometimes when they're trying to not feel what they're feeling. And if you notice any of those changes, it can be really helpful for just being attentive to what you're trying to not feel, as hard as that can be. So in that case, more moderate experiences. Counseling services is a great place to check in with somebody. You can get, like I said, biweekly support, check in with somebody, or at least someone who can guide you to more consistent support. If you are looking for someone who can meet with you weekly, or you're looking for an evaluation, something that can be really helpful. The health center can be good to rule out any medical conditions. So I know we're in a very strange space where some of the symptoms of COVID are basic cold symptoms. Sometimes those are confused with somatic symptoms of anxiety, right? Like getting migraines and headaches has been linked to COVID experiences, but can also be because you're really overwhelmed and stressed. So checking in with the health center can be really helpful for at least sorting through that. Do you have something physically going on? And if not, maybe it is a good time to check in with someone who can provide mental health support. Accessibility services can be really helpful for checking in for any accommodations that you might need, especially with schoolwork. Office of Dean of Students, they have an emergency fund that you can access if you're struggling financially, and maybe can offer support for basic needs in your life. Thriving Campus, and Psychology Today you can turn to for additional providers in the area. A lot of providers are still operating virtually, so you can really see anybody throughout the state who is operating remotely. So know that there's a lot of providers out there that you can turn to. And then some of our off-campus providers. Checking in with the counseling center on campus, we can connect you with providers outside of the campus. If you're uncomfortable kind of doing that research for yourself, you're just really not sure what to look for, you can always check in with us. We have a case manager now who is able to help you get connected to a provider. And then finally, we have crisis, feeling so overwhelmed, everything is going wrong, nothing feels like it's in control anymore. So this might be the inability to speak with others or just difficulty communicating. You are not able to get across what's going on to anybody. You're feeling overly anger outbursts, maybe like punching things or hitting things or just not knowing where to put all of that anger. Threats of harming yourself, maybe other people, extreme substance use, so blacking out frequently or using substances very often, our inability to attend to those basic needs, so not showering, not taking care of yourself physically at all, not eating, not feeling grounded in reality. So maybe seeing some visual hallucinations or hearing some auditory hallucinations, or just not feeling grounded. And then possibly suicide attempt, suicidal ideation, just not feeling safe, like you can keep yourself safe. So those are the more extreme versions of, I don't know what to do. I am really struggling here. So crisis hours are available at the counseling center. You can always stop in. No appointment is needed. You can stop into Mary Walker or you can call ahead. We offer those Monday through Friday during the day. You'll meet with a crisis counselor on staff at that time. So usually there might be like a 10 or 15-minute wait if someone else has come in before you, but it is a good time to get connected with somebody who can help out. After hours crisis, because I know things happen at night. Sometimes we struggle. You can always call a hotline. If you call our office phone in option number 2, that'll connect you with a crisis counselor that you can speak to. This is a 24-hour service. You can connect with them any time of day, any day of the week, any holiday. They're always available. And then more of a local resource that we have is Liberty Resources Mobile Crisis. So they also will be really helpful. They can speak with you over the phone to kind of assess the situation, see what's going on. And they do make house calls, so they can show up to wherever you're located to make sure that you feel safe and can help you sort through the options. They do their best to avoid any kind of hospitalization. I feel like that's not really the goal all the time. But in those situations where maybe you aren't able to keep yourself safe, that is an option that they can help you sort through. Again, 24/7, always available and confidential and free. And then if imminent danger is not safe, you're really worried about yourself or other people, you can always call UUP or UP at 5555 or call 911 or go to the emergency room in Oswego at the hospital. So those are for those urgent situations when things are just feeling real overwhelming, nothing feels safe or grounded, and we need to check in with somebody. Okay, so I'm going to skip this for time because I want to talk a little bit strategies here in our last few minutes. I loved this post. I think this puts things into a really practical application because sometimes we struggle to feel the things we're feeling. We get up in our heads a lot, we're thinking about things, we're stewing on things, but sometimes we do need to accept and allow ourselves to feel an emotion. Some emotions are harder to feel than others, some are easier to feel than others, but I think this is a really good way to at least start to connect with your experience. So what are you feeling in your body? Notice the sensations, notice where they happen, notice what emotion they're connected with. When I'm angry, I clench my jaw, my head gets tight and I get a headache. My chest feels tense. When I'm sad, my eyes water, I feel just defeated, I have to lay down, my stomach hurts. Notice where you feel what you feel and give it a label. Call it something. You can come up with whatever you want to call it, but call it something. When you start to feel it, just observe and sit with it. Breathe through it. Allow yourself to be there with it. Is this going to be easy all the time? No. Some emotions are very big, overwhelming. Sometimes we can sit with them for a little bit of time and then we need to distract. We go watch a show, we go talk to somebody who we care about. That is perfectly okay. As you learn to sit with it, as you feel more comfortable with the discomfort, it gets easier to manage some of the feelings, to hold them, to make space for them. So always have those backups, right? Like sitting with a feeling might be really difficult. What do you go to if it's too big? How long can you sit with it without forcing yourself to sit with it? All of that stuff becomes really important. So this is a great practice. I highly recommend it just for getting acquainted with what you're feeling. Being human, super important. Can you work on self-acceptance? Can you accept that you're complicated and you can be adaptable and you're gonna make mistakes and you feel things and you get through hard challenges? That is a really important starting point. Can you build capacity for self-compassion? Can you gift yourself some time to sit, to focus on yourself, your well-being, what's working, what's not working? Being alone and undistracted can be really, really important these days. We have a lot of technology that's competing for our attention all the time. Can we put that down and sit and just be in the world, be in our body, feel? Because that becomes really vital for dealing with this. If you're just going from scrolling on your phone to being on your computer to going to bed, you don't really get to feel a sense of connection to yourself. You're just living in the screens. And as hard as that can be sometimes, because everything's on a screen these days, we do need that time for our brain, for our body to come out of it. So can you map your own inner world? What do you feel? Where do you feel it? What are your warning signs that things are starting to get a little rocky, that you need maybe some extra support? When do you feel your calmest? When does it feel the easiest to be okay? Is it around certain people? Is it doing certain activities? Is it at night when you're by yourself? What influences your stress, your anxiety, your self-worth, your distress? What causes some of that for you? And then assess your own hopes, goals, and direction. What do you want for yourself? What do you want your life to look like, to be like in the near future, right now? Keeping in mind some of those values and things that are important to you, it really helps us to find that direction. And always be open to learning more. We don't know ourselves fully all the time. We are always learning and growing, and we will be a different person tomorrow than we are right now. So be open to that learning process. You make mistakes, you learn from them, you move forward. Some days are harder than other days, some days are easier. Can you build capacity for self-compassion? Can you stop bullying yourself? Can you stop being your own worst critic? Can you understand that it doesn't help to just berate yourself with critiques and criticisms and negativity? If we hear from other people, we're less likely to take that, right? Like we're going to be like, no, that person's not healthy for me. They're not treating me well. When we are doing it to ourselves and we spend the most time with ourselves, that becomes an issue. How do we build a positive relationship with us? And that means working on self-acceptance. Who are you? What do you want? What's important to you? What do you value? What do you do well? All of that stuff can be really, really important to check in and kind of understand where you're at. If you want to learn more about self-compassion, I'll plug my workshop next Tuesday at 6. Self-compassion workshop, we'll go through some of the strategies and research and all the stuff that you can do to practice this a little bit more, because I don't think we do this enough as a society. And I think it's really important that we work on it. So next Tuesday at 6, shameless plug. Next up, communicating. So can you find ways to tell your stories? Do you have people who are receptive, open to listening? They will hear you out. They'll be there for you in a positive way. If talking to people is maybe too much right now, start with writing. See what it's like to tell the story on a piece of paper. Whether or not you throw it out, whether or not you share it with somebody, it's your own space and your own story. Sometimes we need to put it somewhere to fully grasp it and to feel okay with it. If you're starting to look for those outlets, maybe look in the creative realms. So communicate through painting, through drawing, through sketching, through music, through metaphor, poetry, whatever it may be. Look for the stuff that allows you to express something, even if it's not coherent or understandable to other people. Maybe if it even doesn't even come out clearly, just allow it to come out so that you don't have to hold on to it all the time. And try a little bit at a time. You don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to say everything at once. You don't have to tell everybody your life story immediately. Start with small little pieces here and there. What's something you like? What's something you appreciate about somebody else? What's a cool thing that you saw the other day? And then finally, know when to walk away. Sometimes it's just not helpful to communicate. Someone's not listening. You're not in a good place to talk. It's okay to walk away and come back to it when you're both ready. And then last but not least, a plan of action. Can you write down what's best for you to do when you need to? So you have this structure that we've talked about so far, mild, moderate, severe. Maybe looking at what level you're at and then establishing a plan of action for each of those levels. So what do you do when you start to feel a little bit anxious? Are there certain things that you can turn to? What do you do when that anxiety lasts for a month? What kind of resources are available to you that might be helpful at that time? So what level are you at? What are you feeling? Where do you feel it? Who can you communicate with? And then what things does your mind and body need to address those concerns? I say write this down because I think we don't do this. We don't come with a manual. We don't get to go to the instruction booklet and say, I'm experiencing anxiety. What do I do for Kyle? We have to create that as we go. And I think of so many times where I've been overwhelmed. I have so many ideas for what I can do for my overwhelm, but I get overwhelmed and they are all out the window. I can't think of a single thing. I don't even think to look for something that might be helpful. When you have a tangible plan, something that's visible to you, you're more likely to pick it up and say like, all right, I feel terrible. What can I do right now? It'll give you the practical things to try, those small steps to take when you're not even feeling like you can do it in that time. So write it down. There's a ton of templates that exist out there. If you want to look at a self-care plan or a plan of action or just kind of like checking in with your own mental health plan. If you're working with a provider, you can build that together. Oftentimes in clinical work, we try and establish like, what's your plan of action when you're starting to feel overwhelmed? So know that you can work through it even if it's not entirely on your own. And then last but not least, just some basic reminders here. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to need help. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to check in with people you care about when you are worried about them. We know when people don't feel like they're in the same space they normally are. It's okay to check in. It's okay to take a mental health day. So some days are just not the same. We need break, we need space, we need to focus on ourselves for a little bit. That's okay. It's okay to reevaluate your priorities at any point. Sometimes our direction changes. Sometimes everything that's going on in our life changes. It's okay to reevaluate your responsibilities. Maybe letting go of things that are too much to handle can be freeing, open up some space. It's okay to say no to things. It's okay to say that I have some boundaries that are very clear, and I want to make sure that people don't cross those boundaries. And finally, it's okay to rest. I don't think we hear this enough, but it is okay to rest. And you don't have to feel guilty about resting. As much as people will try to convince you to make the most of every minute of your day, it's okay to not feel like you have to be productive. It's okay to just veg out on the couch and relax. Perfectly okay. So just some reminders for you all. So that's a lot of information. Like I said, this will be available on YouTube if you want to revisit any of it or come back to it. I put up our counseling services information again here. And I would love, 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 and super appreciate if you could fill out the survey using the QR code there. You should be able to access it by taking your phone camera, and it'll send you to a Google form. I want to make good programming, and your opinions really matter in that. So if you can give me any feedback on how this was, I would be super appreciative. You'll see the selection there is learning about your mental health. That's the title of this program specifically. So you'll just have to check that that's the one that's for. But I would really appreciate your feedback, and I am happy to take any questions. I will stop recording now. That way we don't have